forgiven one another your trespasses, even so I, the Lord, forgive you. Nevertheless, there are those among you who have sinned exceedingly, yea, even all that have sinned. But verily I say unto you, beware from henceforth and refrain from sin, lest sore judgments fall upon your heads. For unto whom much is given, much is required, and he who sins against the greater light shall receive the greater condemnation.
Okay. Your thoughts? Now, you can't tell me you don't have an opinion on this. Brother Rick?
It would appear that people that disagreeing with one another is not something that is new. And apparently from the language here, some significant things happened. We don't know what they were, but the Lord is chastising these men, shape up, love one another, and move the work forward.
So, at the risk of sounding a little mirthful, it was a standing high council meeting. So, those of you who have never been in a standing high council meeting, there can be disagreements. And there can be hard feelings that can occur. Brothers don't always act as they should, appropriately. And I think this is the Lord telling them, hey, what part of this didn't you understand? Because to me, it's crazy that he's telling him 1A. How many times has the Lord said that? Especially in the New Testament. You know, you have to forgive everyone. You don't get a choice in this matter. And no, that's not an easy thing to do. Especially when somebody walks up and smacks you in the teeth. And you honestly didn't do anything. But you still had to forgive them. All right. Any other thoughts? I'm going to end up talking too much here. That's not what I want to do here. That's not how a good class works, right? So. 1C is a real tough one. I don't know about you. It kind of falls into my sermon, but I think there are many people that don't get that. They really don't understand 1C. And it's universal. Because it doesn't mean that this only works because you're a baptized member of this church. Would you all agree with that? Yeah. Brother Craig, yeah? Yeah, that's right, Don's not here.
Let's see. I mean, how many times do we see or hear something very similar to this? For unto whom is given much, much is required, and so. I mean, that's true in all things. I mean, in a traffic accident, if there's a nurse or a doctor present and they don't help, I mean, they can be in big trouble because they have more knowledge of what can be done to help people. Well, that's what he's saying here too. You've been given greater light, and if you're not using it appropriately, and if you're just using it to bash each other, that's not going to work for you. You're not going to like what happens. And so I think it's just a good reminder that it shouldn't be an impediment to our learning more. But as we learn more, we're responsible for more. And we're responsible for sharing more and for doing more. And so the greater light that we have, the greater responsibility that we have. And I think he's just emphasizing that here and just saying, come on, you should know better, because if you don't use what I've given you for the right purposes, it will be to your condemnation.
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting to me is that in the working world, many times I see things where this principle is not followed. And I can tell that the people that don't follow it have never, they've never been churched in the Christian faith. They don't clearly understand that. I remember I had tell a quick story. I had a young man who I was working with. He was an engineer. He was very, as a lot of young engineers are, they think they know everything until you really become smart enough, and I put this, to realize you don't know anything. You think you know, but you really don't, because the more you get into the math, the more you get into the science and the physics and everything else, to realize you don't know as much as you think you do. In fact, you're not sure you know anything at points, because not everything works the same way all the time. And I know Craig understands what I'm saying. It can be very different. And this young man, we were working with very high voltage, and we had teams of basically men all over this huge facility. We were all talking on radios. And because he was angry with us, and he thought he knew more than everybody else, he saw a safety concern. And he didn't say anything. Now, luckily, somebody else caught it and said, hey, let's all stop what we're doing. You know, the bus is energized. You know, we need to back off. And then we went through a protocol of what we need to do, so nobody got hurt. This young man, thinking he was so smart, wrote a letter to the owner of the company saying that, well, I knew this, and these guys are all a bunch of idiots, and blah, 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 blah. And I know he got taken aside by more than just myself of, you think that was smart what you did there. You're going to be lucky if they don't fire you from this job. Because when we're talking about human life, when we're talking about saving somebody and destroying equipment, multi-million-dollar equipment in a multi-million-dollar facility, you think not speaking up when you knew the answer, when you knew you could help and save, was smart, and then admitting that? I said, you really need to rethink some things in your life. I said, that's not how this works. And I could tell this young man did not have a background in the scriptures. I argue if he had, he would have understood why. It benefits all. Because I'll never forget telling him, I said, what if I saw something that was about ready to kill you? I just didn't say anything because I didn't like you. You think that's wrong? Well, yeah. Okay. But it's unfortunate that that's where we're at as a society. The Christian faith, the gospel, the true gospel needs to go forth. Okay, enough preaching. Any other thoughts before we leave it? No, Michelle?
I think in general what we're saying here is that God expects us to use the knowledge and the gifts that he gave us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't use it, we're wasting our time here just hanging out. I mean, we have a job to do. We were put here on this earth to fulfill and to live up to the potential which we were created. And when we sit there and twiddle our thumbs and don't get to it and get to the work and everything, we let ourselves down. We let others down for not doing. I mean, more than half the world's never even, really studied or heard about God. Not truly. They're being told certain things by their governments or the other religions that occupy their lands. And it's like, there's a lot of people. And then, that needs to hear about God. And then you've got people who just have, they've been hurt in their own churches and stuff, and they've left because the people that were teaching and preaching and were in the churches they were in, didn't do what they were supposed to do. And now they have skewed opinions of what God is, and they don't want to, they don't want to follow after a God that hurts and does things like this to people because they think of us as representatives of that. And why would they want to attend church and follow a God that behaves, this way and hurts people?
Mm-hmm.
So I think when we're lukewarm, he wants to spew us out because we're not helping. We're just existing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree completely. Okay. Oh, Brother Carl? Right behind you.
You were talking about electricity and mathematics. One of the problems with our thinking sometimes is that you're dealing with something that's true. Okay? When I'm dealing with people telling them the message, I don't know how they're going to receive it because they have agency. The mathematical laws and the electrical laws don't have agency. They say if you do this and do this, this is what's going to happen. No matter how you do it, if you don't do it that way, it's not going to happen. And so we get a little bit put off, discouraged about sharing the witness with other people because they kind of say, oh, yeah, okay, and walk away and think that nothing has happened. But the Lord calls upon us to be the witness. He says, you plant the seed, and I'll take care of the rest, really. And so our job in this whole process is to try to minister to broken hearts, bruised hearts, people who don't know. But all we can do is present to them, but we cannot predict the outcome.
Yeah.
Like you can with the electrical and the mathematical thing. And so we are a little discouraged sometimes when we present this beautiful story and people turn on their backs and walk away. Or they say, we don't want to hear, whatever that might be. And so we may let down then in our witness of something that is so beautiful. We believe it to be the most important thing in the world. Mm-hmm. You know, even more so than electricity and math. I'm not trying to push on you, Jim.
No, you're fine.
But, you know, and we kind of, I guess our egos get bruised a little bit when people don't accept the truth that we're giving, what we're trying to share with them, so on. So we have to know where those people were and so on, because they were pretty, they moved pretty well with their witness, because this is the period of time when the church really grew. Mm-hmm. And they were excited about what they and it didn't make any difference who they were talking to or how many turned their back. They kept talking, and the church grew as far as numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing too, to Carl, to just work off of that parallel you're talking about. So this week, I was in Houston and then Detroit. So 75 degrees and 27 degrees. And, I spent 7 hours with some gentlemen who were working on the electrical distribution system, and they saw a huge anomaly. I'll just explain that. They basically, lights came off, voltage did things it wasn't supposed to, all this kinds of things. And I've learned over time that I can listen to what people tell me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what happened. And what do I have to do? I have to go to the source, and I have to find the source. And so I have this meter that has this data log that tells me down to the millisecond and down to the sub-cycle level what happened. And so then I start going through and start saying, well, this is what I see. Because the problem I've found is that even though the math is clear, and what are you going to argue with me about 1 + 1 = 2? Believe it or not, there are people who are. And the reason they do is because I'm going to hurt their feelings. And one of the things I've learned is the truth will hurt your feelings. It doesn't care. It can't, just as the Lord's talked about, it can't be acted upon. You're not going to change the truth. It's going to either change you or destroy you. One of the two. And you have that option. But I do sometimes find it a little humorous. I spent 7 hours with these men who are good men, and I kept walking them back from point to point to point, and I didn't tell them the answer necessarily. I showed them where the answer was. I kept pointing this way and pointing that way. Just like, just like a good teacher does. Doesn't give the students the answer immediately. They just kind of keep pointing towards where the answers, you can find the answer, and then they derive it for themselves. And once they do, it's a priceless gem that they never forget. And I think that's the way the gospel is that sometimes I think we assume, and I've had this experience many times, and yet I still have the intrepidation of it, that some of the roughest people I've ever met, and some of the hardest souls, that you could take a ball bearing and throw it and bounce it off their head and it wouldn't do anything to them. They're just that kind of person. And yet, over time, if the message is consistent, you've actually made a change in them. And you see it. And you see the Holy Spirit working with them. And it will. Because it's really hard to resist the Holy Spirit. I argue it's really kind of this inevitable thing. You will inevitably, whether it's at the judgment bar, you're that good at resisting it, or, somewhere in this life, you finally wear down and say, you know what? Maybe I should do what God told me to do. Maybe I should follow his path, even though I don't want to. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm preaching. All right. Good thoughts, though. Very good thoughts. 1D and through 1E. Who would like to read those two? Okay, Brother Rick.
Ye call upon my name for revelations, and I give them unto you. And inasmuch as ye keep not my sayings which I give unto you, ye become transgressors, and justice and judgment is the penalty which is affixed unto my law. Therefore, what I say unto one, I say unto all, watch, for the adversary spreadeth his dominions, and darkness reigneth. And the anger of God is kindled against the inhabitants of the earth, and none doeth good, for all have gone out of the way.
Okay, what are your thoughts on that verse? Yeah? Yeah, it's if you really take this to heart and say you were the first ones to hear this revelation coming from God, how tall do you think you would be standing? I know I'd be this tall. Because the Lord said, all have gone out of the way. None doeth good. Wow, that's me. Because there's certain times I think I do good. The challenge. What else do you see in there? Brother Carl?
That statement, the first part of statement of 1E. Therefore, what I say unto one, I say unto all. And, I've heard the arguments that, the things that were given to the early church, the things that were given 20 years ago, really don't pertain to us anymore, because, that's gone by. Well, that's not what the Lord's saying here. He's saying, what I say unto one, I say unto all. He says unto everybody, you love one another. And that was said back in when Jesus was here and he taught his disciples. That was a new thought, really. But in the world in which we live, we don't see that practiced as much as we would like to have it practiced. I mean, I know there are a lot of good people who do that. I don't misunderstand me, but it's and so what he's trying to say to us is that everything I give to you, you've got to take care of. all my commandments, not just the ones we think pertain to us or the things that we think's all right. Because the Lord gives us commandments, and He only gives us those things that are for our good, for the best, that they will make the best of us if we do what the Lord asks us to do.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? If you let me talk, I'll just go down a rabbit trail here. Yeah. Sister Artis?
Well, and while I think that all of that at the end there about the judgment is very, very sobering, I think that there's a word up there in that first line of 1E that's the operative word, which is watch. For the adversary spreadeth his dominions, and darkness reigneth. And we have to be constantly on our guard, because it is all around us, and it is too easy to be sucked into that. And so I think watch is extremely important.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the Lord's telling these men that's the case. You know, one of the things about the Doctrine and Covenants that's very different than the other scriptures is that the history portion has been removed or was not included. And so this doesn't tell us, you know, brother so-and-so, we met in this meadow and we went over to this field and we sat on this rock and we did this and it was on the 5th day and all that's been stripped out. You know, except for the preface, which is not a part of the doctrine portion, that kind of gives you an idea where it's at. You don't have that. You just have the pure message. And so, to your point and to Carl's point, that's what we're really seeing here, is we're seeing kind of a condensed message. I would really have preferred that would have been integrated like it is in the other scriptures. But I understand why the Lord's put it this way, because I think He's trying to really type in all caps, you know? How many times must I tell you this is what you need to do? And so it's just like when He's talking about justice and judgment, and the penalty is fixed unto my law. How many times has He talked about law and the basis of law, that you can't rob justice? You just can't. It must be paid for. But He's, I think in the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord's really trying to really, you know, use that megaphone, if you will, to say, hey. And some of it, I think we, you know, unfortunately because of the time we live in, if you go back to, there's always been harsh speak, okay? There's always been, I'm sure anywhere in the world, any century you want to look at, there's always been crude and cruel speech that's been out there, okay? But in today's world, the words themselves have changed, their definition and meaning, and the cruelty, the lack of love, the void of the Spirit is there. And so we almost become numb, I would argue, to some of the things that we should be, you know, wow, the Lord said that. Because everything around us is screaming and yelling, trying to grab our attention. So, okay, well, my time has fled, and although I think the speaker won't mind if I went over a little bit. But anyway, let us make preparation for the service to come. Thank you for your comments. No, I guess I got